Hi there and welcome to CodeFramer. In this video, I will be giving a few more examples of how to use the while to perform certain operations. I highly recommend you to have a look at the example, and use your own imagination later, to solve more problems using the while loop. So that you are extremely comfortable later to use the while loops to solve any problem statements. So for now let us have a look at the example that we are going to solve using the while loop. Let us try to draw this pattern using the while loop. As you can see here, we are printing stars in multiple rows. If you want you can pause the video here, and try to write a pseudocode which will define the logic for us to solve this problem. If you want to directly know the solution then just continue watching. In order to create this pattern, we must observe this pattern carefully. As the first observation you can see we have 5 rows here, and in each row we are printing a certain amount of star symbols. So definitely we will have to loop through all the rows one by one to print stars. Secondly, we need to decide on how we are going to calculate the number of stars required in each row. Here, the first row has a single star, the second row is having 2 stars, the third row is having 3 stars and so on. This clearly means that we will have to print an equal number of stars as the row number. So which means the first row will have 1 star, second row will have 2 stars and so on. Okay, good. I think we have found one solution using which we can write our code. But hey wait, we are missing one important part in our logic, it is that how are we going to print multiple stars inside a particular row. So in order to print multiple stars inside a row, we will have to create one more loop in each row to print the stars. Which means that in row 1, our internal while loop will loop once, in row 2, the internal while loop will loop twice and so on. This will ensure that we are printing required amount of stars in each row to make our pattern. I think the solution looks complete. Now let us move to the PyCharm editor and write our code to test if our understanding is correct. Let me first create the pattern that we want to create in our output so that we don't get distracted from our goal. So this is the pattern that we are going to code. So let us first start by initializing a variable I, which will measure the number of times we are looping the rows. So we can write, I, equals 1. Here I will initialize from 1 instead of 0, to avoid confusion. In the next line, we can start our while loop, so we can write, while, I is less than 6, and then we can give colon to conclude our while loop statement. So as you can see here, after the keyword while, we have given our conditional expression, based on which we will stop our while loop. So until, I, become 5, the while loop, will keep looping. So the while loop, using which we can loop through the rows, is created. Now we need to create the loop for printing the stars in each row. Which means that again we have to initialize another variable, which will count the number of stars we are printing in each row. So let us write, j equals 0. In the next line, we can start our while loop for printing the stars, so we can write, while, j is less than I, and then colon. Remember, that we need to print the star in each row based on the number of row. Hence, we have the condition as j should be less than I. If you are not understanding this, then wait for a moment, I will explain to you clearly after completing the code. In the next line we can print the star, so we can write, print, star, and then we can write the argument, end, and then pass empty space as the value. This is because, print by default creates a new line, each time when it is executed, and since we want to print the star in a single row, we can pass the argument end, as empty space, so that the print statement, prints empty space, every time it is executed instead of a new line, and then in the next line, we can increment j. And in the next line, we can increment I. Be careful with the indentation here, as the Python interpreter completely relies on the indentation, for the correct execution. Notice that I have incremented, j, inside the while loop created for j. And I, is incremented inside the while loop created for I. And finally we can write print, so that we can create a new line for each row. Now let us execute this code. So as you can see in the output, our pattern is printed correctly. Let us see how the code is getting executed, to understand it better. So first, the variable, I, will be assigned with the value 1. In the next line, the while loop will start, and the value of I, which is 1, will be less than 6, hence the interpreter will check the block of code, inside the while loop. In the next line, we have initialized another variable, j, with the value 0. And then we again start the while loop, which will compare the variable, j, and I, so here, the value of j is 0, and the value of I is 1. Since the condition is true, then the print statement will get executed inside the internal while loop. Then the value of j will get increment to 1. In this case the condition, j is less than I, will fail, because both the value of I and j are 1 now. Hence the interpreter will move out of the internal while loop, and go to the outer while loop, and execute the next statement, which is to increment the value of I by 1. And then an empty print statement is executed to create a new line. Now the condition of outer while loop will again execute, and this time the value of I will be 2 and it will be again less than 6. Now the interpreter moves to the next line, and the value of j is again reinitialized to 0. Now the internal while loop is again executed, and the conditional statement will get executed, where the value of j will be 0, and the value of I will be 2. So the interpreter will execute the print statement once, and the first star in the second row will get printed. Now in the next line, j will get increment to 1, and then the internal while loop condition will get executed again, where value of j will be 1, and the value of I will be 2. The condition will become true, and then the print statement will be executed again, and the second star will be printed again in the same row. Remember that we have given the end argument inside the print statement, due to which the row will remain the same. Now j will be incremented again and this time its value will become 2, due to which the internal while loop statement will fail, as j is now equal to I, which is 2. Now again in the next line, I will get incremented to 3, and then the print statement will execute, to move to the next row. Same logic will be repeated until the value of I becomes 6, and the outer while loop stops the execution. I hope that the execution flow is clear. I highly recommend you to practice more with some other patterns. For example, you can try to create an opposite pattern like this, where we start with 5 stars in the first row, and then we move down to a single star in the 5th row. If you struggle with this problem, then believe me, allow yourself to struggle with that problem as long as you can. The more you struggle to find a solution, the more you think, and the more you think, you will keep getting better at coding and problem solving. Try using your own imagination and solve different problems using a while loop, so that you become extremely comfortable. In the next video, I will explain the for loop with examples. If you like this video, then hit the like button, share it with other code lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thanks for watching and happy learning.